Hello, everyone. It is good to be with you again. Today, we're going to be continuing with our godly play story, The Faces of Easter, and we're going to hear three more important events in Jesus' life that lead us to Easter. If you were with us last week, you'll remember we heard first about how Jesus was born to Mary and Joseph. And we heard about how Jesus, when he was 12 years old, was lost in the temple, and then his parents found him. Well, let's continue. The next important event that happened in Jesus' life was when he was about 30 years old, and it was time for him to be baptized. And Jesus' cousin, a man named John, was baptizing people in the river. John was a wild man with crazy hair that you can see. And Jesus walked into the river and looked him in the eyes and said, "Baptize me." But John said, "You are more powerful than me. You should be the one baptizing me." But Jesus said, "No, it has been foretold that you should baptize me." And so John dipped Jesus down into the chaos and the darkness of the water. And when Jesus came up, some people who were there said that they saw a dove descending from heaven and resting over Jesus. And some other people who were there said that they heard a voice coming from heaven that said, "You're my beloved child. I'm pleased with you." Now, this story makes me wonder a couple things. It makes me wonder if any of you have been baptized. And who was there the day that you were baptized? And how did they feel about it? So why don't you hit pause or take a second to meditate, discuss that with whoever you're with, or meditate it yourself about your baptism. And as we come back, whatever discussion or meditation you just did, maybe you realized or discovered that your family and your story is part of God's story. The next thing that happened to Jesus that was important happened right after he was baptized. And this is when he went into the desert to discover what his work was going to be. Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and for 40 nights. And one day, he was visited by a voice. And this voice showed him some stones and said, "If you're truly the Son of God, command those stones to turn into bread." And Jesus said, "No. A person needs more than just bread to live." And then the voice took him to the highest point in Jerusalem and said, "If you're truly the Son of God, jump off of this cliff, and God will send angels to catch you before you hit the rocks." And Jesus said, "No, it is not good to test God." And then the voice showed Jesus all the kingdoms of the world and said, "If you bow down and worship me, I will give you all these kingdoms." And Jesus said, "No, I am a king, but I am not that kind of king. After this, the voice left him, and Jesus went back across the Jordan River, and he began his work. Now, this story in Jesus' life makes me wonder something also. It makes me wonder if any of you have ever wondered what your work was going to be in life, or what you were going to do with your life. And so why don't you press pause and take a minute to discuss that with whoever you're watching this with, or to meditate upon it yourself. And as we come back, maybe we realized in thinking about what our work will be, maybe we realized or learned that our story and our family story is part of God's story. After he left the desert and went back across the river, it was time for Jesus, who had just realized what his work would be, it was time for him to begin his work. But what would his work be? His work was to go to people who needed help and to heal them. His work was especially to go to people who other people did not want to be around, and to spend time with them and come close to them and heal them. And so one day, Jesus came across a man who was blind, and who had been born blind and had been blind from birth. And Jesus came up to him and touched his eyes, and all of a sudden the man could see again. For the first time he could see. Now, this event in Jesus' life makes me wonder whether you have ever come close to someone who needed help, and what you did and what happened. And this story also makes me wonder if you ever needed help, and if there ever was a time when someone else came close to you and helped you. Now, this is an interesting time in the world to talk about coming close to people and touching them and healing them. It's an interesting time to talk about being close to people who other people don't want to be close to. But maybe as we pause, you can talk about times where you've helped someone or someone's helped you. Or we can talk about how even today, even in this time, how we can come close to people and help them. Let's pause and discuss that with whoever you're watching this with, or meditate about that yourself. And as we come back, as you had that discussion or that meditation, maybe you realized or learned, and we realized and we learned, that our story and our family's story, our church's story, our world's story is part of God's story. We're going to close by praying, and so please repeat after me. Dear God, thank you for baptizing us, for giving us work to do, and for healing us. Keep us strong in these days. Amen. Thank you all for being here again. I'll see you again next Tuesday, where we'll have our 6th and 7th, our last two important events in Jesus' life. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe. Wash your hands. We'll see you all soon.